AITA for evicting my stepbrother after my dad secretly gave him my address? 28F. Never thought I'd be writing one of these, but I need to know if I'm the villain my father is painting me to be. This situation has spiraled so far out of control that I've had to involve lawyers, and half my family isn't speaking to me. For background, I'm a registered nurse who recently bought my first home, a small townhouse about 10 minutes from the hospital where I work. After years of grinding through night shifts, overtime, and living in a cramped apartment with roommates, finally having my own space felt like a massive achievement. The closing was in March, and I was so proud that I'd done this entirely on my own, without any family help. My relationship with my dad, 54M, has always been complicated. My parents divorced when I was 12, and Dad remarried Linda, 48F, 3 years later. Linda brought her son Kyle, now 25M, into the marriage. While Dad bent over backwards to make Kyle feel welcome in our blended family, I often felt like an afterthought. Every achievement of mine was minimized, while Kyle's participation trophies were displayed prominently. When I got into nursing school, Dad's response was, "That's nice, honey." When Kyle got a C+ in community college, Dad threw a celebration dinner. Despite this dynamic, I've tried to maintain a relationship with my father. We have dinner once a month, exchange pleasantries at family gatherings, and I even invited him and Linda to see my new townhouse after I moved in. That visit, in retrospect, was my first mistake. During the tour, Dad kept making comments about how much space I had for one person. 3 bedrooms just for you, he'd say, or, this basement could easily be converted into a separate living space. I laughed it off, explaining that I used one room as a home office and the other for guests. The basement was my workout area and storage. He seemed particularly interested in the fact that the previous owners had installed a separate entrance to the basement, which they'd used for their elderly mother. About 2 weeks after that visit, I started receiving Amazon packages addressed to Kyle. The first one arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I texted Dad, confused, asking if Kyle had accidentally used my address. Dad responded quickly, "Oh, Kyle's having some issues with package theft at his apartment complex. I gave him your address for just this one important delivery. Hope that's okay." I wasn't thrilled, he should have asked first, but I figured it was a one-time thing. I texted Kyle to let him know his package had arrived and that he could pick it up after I got home from my shift at 7 p.m. He showed up at 10 p.m., apologizing profusely, explaining he'd been caught up at work. He seemed genuine, so I handed over the package and thought that was the end of it. The next week, 3 more packages arrived for Kyle. Then 5 the week after that. Each time, I'd text him, and he'd show up at increasingly inconvenient hours to collect them. I work 3 12-hour shifts per week, often nights, and having my doorbell ring at 11 p.m. when I'm trying to sleep before a 7 a.m. shift was becoming a real problem. When I confronted Dad about it, he got defensive. Kyle's lease is up soon, and he's between places. It's just temporary. Family helps family, right? Or is that concept foreign to you now that you're successful? That stung, but I held my ground and told him Kyle needed to find another solution. Dad agreed, and the packages stopped, for about 4 days. The following Monday, I came home from a particularly brutal night shift to find a furniture delivery truck in my driveway. The delivery guys insisted they had the right address for Kyle Morrison. They had a bed frame, mattress, dresser, and several boxes labeled Kyle's bedroom. I refused delivery and called my dad immediately. "Where else is he supposed to have it delivered?" Dad asked, as if I was being unreasonable. "His apartment situation is complicated right now." "What do you mean, complicated?" I pressed. That's when the truth started trickling out. Kyle had been evicted from his apartment 2 weeks ago. He'd been couch surfing with friends while looking for a new place. Dad and Linda's house didn't have room for him. They'd converted Kyle's old bedroom into Linda's crafting room, and Dad thought, somehow, that having Kyle's mail and packages delivered to my address would be a temporary solution until Kyle figured things out. I was furious. "Dad, you can't just redirect someone's life to my address without asking me." "It's just mail," he said dismissively. "You're barely home anyway with your shifts." Update 1. The mail situation escalates. After the furniture incident, I thought I'd made myself clear. No more deliveries for Kyle at my address. I even sent a text to both Dad and Kyle stating explicitly that any packages or mail sent to my address would be marked "Return to Sender." Kyle responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Dad didn't respond at all. For about a week, things were quiet. Then I checked my mail on a rare day off and found something that made my blood run cold. Credit card applications in Kyle's name, all listing my address. Not just 1 or 2. I counted 7 different applications from various banks and credit unions. I immediately called Kyle. Why are credit card companies sending applications to my house? Oh, he said casually, I might have updated my address with a few places. You know, for important stuff. Dad said it was cool. Dad doesn't own this house. I do. I practically shouted. And no, it's not cool. This is mail fraud. Kyle got defensive. It's not fraud if we're family. Besides, I need a stable address for job applications. Do you want me to be homeless and jobless? I hung up and called my dad. The conversation went about as well as you'd expect. You're overreacting, Dad said. Kyle just needs a stable address for a few weeks while he gets back on his feet. He's using my address for credit applications. What if he defaults? What if creditors come looking for him here? Kyle would never do that, Dad insisted. You know, your mother poisoned you against this family. Linda's right. You've always resented Kyle. That was a low blow. My mother had died of cancer 5 years ago, and Dad knew invoking her was a sure way to hurt me. But it also strengthened my resolve. I spent my next day off at the post office, filling out forms to stop Kyle's mail from being delivered to my address. The postal worker was sympathetic but informed me that since Kyle was already receiving mail there, it was more complicated than simply refusing delivery. She suggested I might need legal help. That evening, I installed a security camera at my front door. Call it intuition or just years of dealing with my father's manipulations, but something told me I'd need evidence of what was to come. The next morning, I was vindicated. The camera footage showed Kyle arriving at 6 a.m. with a suitcase, using a key to try to open my door. When it didn't work, I changed the locks after closing, thank God. He sat on my porch for an hour before leaving. I texted him immediately, I saw you on camera trying to enter my house. You do not have permission to be on my property. His response, Dad gave me a key. He said you were being dramatic but would come around. I called Dad, fury burning through my exhaustion from my night shift. You made a copy of my house key? I made a copy of the spare you gave me for emergencies, he said, like it was nothing. Kyle needed somewhere to stay, and you have all that room. That key was for emergencies. Not for you to move Kyle in. He's your brother, Dad said. Stepbrother, I corrected. And even if he was my biological brother, you don't get to decide who lives in my house. Family helps family, he repeated, like a mantra. Or did your mother not teach you that? I hung up on him. Update 2. The school district fraud. 2 weeks after the key incident, I thought things had finally calmed down. Kyle had stopped trying to enter my house, the mail situation was being handled legally, and I'd installed additional security cameras around my property. I should have known it was the calm before the storm. I was at work when I received a call from Riverside Elementary School. The principal's secretary asked if I could confirm that Kyle Morrison was living at my address and was the legal guardian of a child named Mason. I nearly dropped my phone. I'm sorry, what? No, Kyle doesn't live here, and I don't know any child named Mason. The secretary sounded confused. But we have paperwork filed last week listing this address as the primary residence for Kyle Morrison and his son Mason, age 6. Your address is in our district boundaries. My mind was reeling. Kyle had a son, and he was using my address for school enrollment? Ma'am, I need to be very clear, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Kyle Morrison does not live at my address. I am the sole owner and resident of this property. Any paperwork stating otherwise is fraudulent. She promised to look into it and get back to me. I immediately left work, thankfully. My charge nurse was understanding when I explained it was a legal emergency, and drove home to find Kyle's car in my driveway and Kyle himself sitting on my porch with a small boy. Get off my property, I said before even getting out of my car. Mason, go play in the backyard, Kyle told the boy, who looked confused but walked around the side of my townhouse. Kyle stood up, trying to look casual. Hey sis. Don't hey sis me. You're committing fraud. School district fraud. That's a felony, Kyle. He shrugged. Riverside is the best elementary school in the area. Mason deserves a good education. Dad said you'd understand if you knew about Mason. Dad knew about Mason? I asked, incredulous. Of course he knew. He's been helping me with the custody situation. Mason's mom is unstable. I just got emergency custody last month. Dad said you'd be cool with us staying here once you knew there was a kid involved. Dad doesn't get to make that decision. I was practically screaming now. This is my house. And you're committing fraud using my address. Kyle's casual demeanor finally cracked. What was I supposed to do? His mom lives in a terrible school district. I can't afford private school. I'm just trying to be a good dad. By committing fraud? By trying to move into my house without permission? By teaching your son that lying is okay? You have 3 bedrooms. Kyle exploded. You have a whole basement. Mason and I could live in the basement, and you'd never even know we were here. But no, you're too selfish to help family. Dad's right about you, you're just like your mom, cold and heartless. I pulled out my phone. You have 5 minutes to get Mason and leave my property, or I'm calling the police. Kyle stared at me in disbelief. You'd call the cops on your own brother? With my kid here. Stepbrother, I corrected. And you're the one who brought a child into your criminal activities. 5 minutes, Kyle. He called for Mason, and they left, but not before Kyle said, Dad's going to hear about this. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Dad, and he was angrier than I'd ever heard him. You threatened to have Kyle arrested? In front of his son, he roared. Kyle is committing fraud, Dad. School district fraud, mail fraud, and attempted breaking and entering. He's trying to provide for his son. Your nephew. He's not my nephew. Kyle is not my brother. And even if he was, that doesn't give him the right to steal my identity and my address. Steal? Dad scoffed. You're being dramatic. Linda was right about you. You've always been jealous of Kyle, and now you're taking it out on an innocent child. I'm protecting myself from fraud and invasion of my property, I said firmly. And if you gave Kyle any advice about using my address for school enrollment, you're complicit in that fraud. Dad went quiet for a moment. Then, in a cold voice I'd never heard before, he said, You're no daughter of mine. Your mother would be ashamed of what you've become, a heartless, selfish woman who won't even help a child get a decent education. He hung up before I could respond. Update 3. The legal battle begins. After the school district incident, I knew I needed professional help. I hired a lawyer, Rebecca Chen, who specialized in property law and fraud cases. The retainer fee hurt my savings, but I knew this situation had escalated beyond what I could handle alone. Rebecca's first action was to send cease and desist letters to both Kyle and my father. She also contacted the school district to formally notify them of the fraud. What she discovered in her investigation made my stomach turn. Kyle hadn't just used my address for school enrollment. He'd filed for multiple government benefits listing my address as his residence. Food stamps, child care assistance, and even emergency housing vouchers, all using my address. He'd also apparently told several government agencies that I was his landlord and had provided a fake lease agreement with my forged signature. This is extensive fraud, Rebecca told me during our meeting. He's created a paper trail suggesting he's been living at your property for months. We need to act quickly before this affects your credit or legal standing. But the worst was yet to come. When I got home from the lawyer's office, there was an official-looking notice posted on my door, a tenant's rights notice from Kyle's new lawyer, claiming that as an established tenant, he had rights to the property and couldn't be removed without proper eviction proceedings. I called Rebecca immediately. He's never lived here. How can he claim tenant rights? Unfortunately, with the paper trail he's created, we'll have to go through the formal eviction process to protect you legally. Even though it's fraudulent, we need to do this by the book. The next day, things got even more complicated. I woke up to find Kyle's car in my driveway again, but this time, he wasn't alone. Linda was with him, along with Mason and what looked like a moving truck. I walked outside in my scrubs, I was due at work in an hour, to find Linda directing movers to put Kyle's furniture in my garage. What the hell do you think you're doing? I demanded. Linda turned to me with a sickeningly sweet smile. Oh, honey, we're just helping Kyle move in. Your dad gave us permission. My dad doesn't own this house. Get this truck off my property now. Linda's smile turned cold. You know, I always told your father you were trouble. Even as a teenager, you were selfish and cruel to poor Kyle. And now, when he needs help, when a child needs stability, you're showing your true colors. Kyle stood behind her, holding Mason's hand, looking like the victim in this scenario. Several of my neighbors were watching from their yards. Kyle is not moving in, I said loudly, aware of my audience. He has never lived here. He's committing fraud by using my address, and I have a lawyer involved. Linda gasped dramatically. You hired a lawyer? Against family? What kind of person sues their own brother? The kind who's protecting herself from fraud and invasion, I shot back. Now get off my property before I call the police. Linda pulled out her phone. Go ahead. Call them. I'll call Child Protective Services and tell them you're creating an unsafe environment for a child. It was a standoff. I knew she was bluffing, but the threat of CPS, even unfounded, could cause problems for me professionally. Nurses underwent background checks, and any investigation, even if cleared, would be on my record. Rebecca arrived within 20 minutes. I'd texted her frantically, and handled the situation with professional calm. She informed Linda and Kyle that they were trespassing, that the moving truck needed to leave immediately, and that any further attempts to access the property would result in criminal charges. Linda tried to argue, but Rebecca shut her down. "Ma'am, your son has committed multiple counts of fraud. The fact that you're here attempting to move him in despite knowing he has no legal right to this property makes you an accomplice. I suggest you leave before my client presses charges." They left, but not before Kyle looked at me with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he said. "Dad's right about you. You're evil." Update 4. The family divides. The week after the moving truck incident, my life became a nightmare of legal proceedings and family warfare. Rebecca filed formal eviction papers. Even though Kyle had never actually lived there, we needed the legal protection, fraud reports with multiple agencies, and a restraining order request. Meanwhile, my father launched what I can only describe as a scorched earth campaign against me. It started with the family group chat. I woke up after a night shift to 47 messages. Dad had written a long message painting me as a cruel, heartless woman who was actively trying to make a 6-year-old child homeless. He claimed I had 3 empty bedrooms and a full basement, but would rather see my nephew on the street than share my space. He conveniently left out all the fraud, the forged documents, and the fact that Kyle had tried to break into my house. My Aunt Sarah, Dad's sister, immediately sided with him. "I can't believe you'd do this to family. Your mother must be rolling in her grave." My Uncle Tom, Mom's brother, tried to defend me. Maybe we should hear both sides before jumping to conclusions. But Dad had already poisoned the well. He'd apparently called various family members individually, telling them that I was jealous of Kyle's relationship with him, that I'd always resented having a stepbrother, and that I was using my newfound success to punish the family. The messages got increasingly nasty. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were calling me selfish. My grandmother, Dad's mom, left me a voicemail saying she was disappointed in who I'd become. The only people who seemed to be on my side were Uncle Tom and my best friend from nursing school, Maya, who'd been watching this drama unfold from the beginning. But the family drama was just the tip of the iceberg. Kyle had apparently been telling people in the neighborhood that he was my brother who I'd kicked out despite him having a young son. Some neighbors looked at me with disgust. Others whispered when I walked by. One woman actually confronted me at the mailbox, saying, "I can't believe you'd leave a child homeless. What kind of monster are you?" I tried to explain, but she'd already made up her mind. "I have kids," she said. "I could never imagine being so cruel." The stress was affecting my work. I was exhausted from dealing with legal issues, family drama, and lack of sleep. My manager noticed and pulled me aside. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "You seem distracted." I broke down and told her everything. Thankfully, she was supportive. "Take a few days off," she said. "Get this sorted. We need you at your best, and you can't be that while dealing with this mess." During those days off, Rebecca called with an update. The school district was investigating Kyle for fraud. The various government agencies were also investigating. But more concerning was what she discovered about the fake lease. "He didn't just forge your signature," she said. "He created an entire rental history. He's been telling people he's been paying you rent for 6 months. He even has fake receipts." "How is that possible?" I asked, stunned. "He created fake bank transfers that look like rent payments. On surface examination, it looks legitimate. We'll need to prove these are fraudulent, which means subpoenaing bank records." The legal fees were mounting. What I'd saved for home improvements and emergencies was being drained by lawyer costs. When I mentioned this to Maya, she suggested starting a GoFundMe, but I refused. I didn't want to air my family's dirty laundry more publicly than it already was. Then came the emergency custody hearing. Kyle's ex, Mason's mother, had caught wind of the school district fraud and filed for emergency custody, claiming Kyle was unstable and committing crimes. Kyle, in turn, tried to subpoena me as a witness, claiming I'd agreed to let him use my address and was now reneging. Rebecca shut that down quickly, but not before I had to provide a sworn affidavit about the entire situation. Having to detail my family dysfunction in legal documents was humiliating and exhausting. The breaking point came when Dad showed up at my work. Security called me, saying my father was in the lobby demanding to speak with me. I went down, hoping to handle it quietly. Dad looked haggard. "You've destroyed everything," he said. "Kyle lost custody of Mason. The boy is with his unstable mother now. This is your fault." "Kyle lost custody because he committed fraud," I said quietly, aware of my co-workers watching. "That's not my fault. You could have just let him use your address. You could have helped. Instead, you chose to be vindictive and cruel, just like your mother." "Don't you dare talk about Mom," I hissed. "She would have been appalled by what you've done." "What I've done?" Dad laughed bitterly. "I tried to help my son. You're the one who involved lawyers and police. You're the one who broke up a family." "Kyle broke up his own family by committing crimes," I said. "And you enabled him. Now please leave before security escorts you out." He left, but not before saying loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You're no daughter of mine. You're heartless, selfish, and you'll die alone just like your mother did." The words cut deep. Mom hadn't died alone. I'd been there, holding her hand. But in his anger, Dad was willing to weaponize even her death. Update 5. Resolution and Aftermath. It's been 3 months since this all started, and I'm finally ready to share the resolution. The legal battles have mostly concluded, and the dust has settled, though the family wounds are far from healed. First, the legal outcomes. Kyle was charged with multiple counts of fraud. The school district pressed charges, as did 2 of the government agencies he'd defrauded. He ended up pleading guilty to lesser charges and received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service, and was ordered to pay restitution. He also lost all custody rights to Mason, who is now living with his maternal grandparents. Apparently, his mother had her own issues, which the court determined made her unfit as well. The fake tenant situation was resolved when Rebecca proved the fraudulent nature of Kyle's documents. The eviction proceedings were dropped since it was established he'd never been a legal tenant. The restraining order was granted, meaning Kyle cannot come within 500 feet of me or my property. My father was not charged, though the investigation revealed he'd known about and assisted in some of Kyle's schemes. His reputation in our extended family, however, is another story. Remember Uncle Tom, who'd initially defended me? He did his own investigation, talking to neighbors, reviewing the legal documents I shared with him, and even speaking with Rebecca. He then systematically dismantled Dad's narrative in the family group chat with receipts, screenshots, and evidence. The family divided into camps. Dad's side included Linda, naturally, my grandmother, Aunt Sarah, and a handful of cousins who still believed I should have just helped family. My side included Uncle Tom, his wife, my mother's entire side of the family, who came out of the woodwork when they heard Dad was dragging Mom's memory through the mud, and surprisingly, my dad's brother, Uncle Pete, who'd apparently watched Kyle grow up to be entitled and was disgusted by the fraud. The neighborhood situation improved after Kyle's arrest made the local news. The neighbor who'd called me a monster actually apologized, saying she'd been manipulated by Kyle's sob story. Others were more reserved but stopped actively shunning me. Work was supportive throughout. My manager connected me with the Employee Assistance Program for counseling, which I desperately needed. The stress had taken a toll. I'd lost 15 pounds, wasn't sleeping well, and was having anxiety attacks. The counselor helped me process not just the recent events but years of family dysfunction. The financial hit was significant. Legal fees totaled nearly $12,000, wiping out my emergency fund and the money I'd saved for home improvements. But Rebecca assured me it was worth it to protect my home, credit, and reputation. Kyle's restitution payments are supposed to reimburse some of this, but I'm not holding my breath. The hardest part has been grieving the loss of my relationship with my father. Despite everything, part of me had hoped he'd eventually see reason. Instead, he doubled down. He sent me a certified letter formally disowning me, removing me from his will, and stating he wanted no further contact. He also spread rumors that I was the reason Mason ended up in foster care, temporarily, before his grandparents got custody, though anyone who knew the facts understood this was Kyle's doing. Linda sent her own nasty letter, calling me every name in the book and saying I'd destroyed their family. She claimed Kyle was suicidal over losing Mason and that it was my fault. I forwarded this to Rebecca, who added it to our documentation in case they tried anything else. But there have been silver linings. Uncle Tom and his family have become much closer to me. They invited me to Thanksgiving. Dad had made it clear I was not welcome at his, and it was the most peaceful holiday I'd had in years. My cousin Rachel, Tom's daughter, even said, "We always knew Uncle Mark played favorites with Kyle. We just didn't realize how bad it had gotten." I've also grown closer to my mom's family. Her sister, Aunt Julie, called me after hearing about everything. "Your mom would be proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said. "She always worried your dad would try to take advantage of your success. She'd be glad you didn't let him. The house finally feels like mine again." I installed a better security system, changed all the locks again, just to be safe, and even got a dog, a German Shepherd mix named Bailey, who makes me feel safer and less alone. The 3 bedrooms Dad mocked me for having? One remains my office, one is a guest room that Aunt Julie used when she visited last month, and Bailey has claimed the corner of my bedroom as his domain. I've also started therapy to deal with the deeper issues this situation uncovered. The therapist helped me realize that Dad's favoritism toward Kyle wasn't new. It was just the most extreme manifestation of a pattern that had existed for years. Every time I succeeded, Dad found a way to minimize it while inflating Kyle's minor achievements. When I graduated nursing school with honors, Dad couldn't attend because Kyle had a community college basketball game. When I got promoted to charge nurse, Dad's response was to tell me Kyle had just gotten a job at a call center and wasn't that wonderful. The therapist also helped me understand that Dad's invocation of my mother wasn't really about her, it was about manipulation. He knew mentioning her was a weapon that would hurt me, and he used it liberally when I didn't comply with his wishes. As for Kyle, I've heard through the grapevine that he's living with a friend and working at a warehouse. He's supposedly trying to get his life together to regain some custody of Mason, though given the fraud convictions, that seems unlikely. Part of me feels sad for Mason. He's an innocent child caught in adult drama. But that's not my responsibility to fix. Dad and Linda have apparently been telling anyone who will listen that I'm a vindictive daughter who chose property over family. Some people believe them. But those who matter know the truth. And more importantly, I know the truth. So, Reddit, after all of this, the fraud, the attempted break-in, the fake tenancy, the family warfare, the legal battles, the financial drain, and the complete destruction of my relationship with my father AITA for not just letting Kyle use my address in my home. Because even now, after everything, there's still a small voice in my head that sounds suspiciously like my father, saying that family should help family, that I had the space, that I could have prevented all of this by just saying yes. But then I remember, Kyle committed multiple felonies using my address. He tried to break into my home. He created fraudulent documents with my forged signature. He attempted to establish tenancy in my home without my consent. And my father enabled all of it. I protected myself, my home, and my future. If that makes me heartless, then so be it. At least I'm heartless with good credit, a secure home, and the knowledge that I stood up for myself when my own family tried to steamroll me. The house is quiet now. Bailey is sleeping at my feet as I write this. The security cameras show an empty driveway. The mail that arrives is all addressed to me. And for the first time in months, I can breathe. I know this isn't the update some might have hoped for, a reconciliation, a happy ending where everyone realizes their mistakes and comes together. Real life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes, protecting yourself means losing people you thought would always be there. Sometimes, the family you're born into isn't the family you end up with. But I'm okay. I'm rebuilding. I have my career, my home, my dog, and the family members who stood by me. The others. They made their choice when they decided Kyle's criminal behavior was less important than my compliance. So that's my story. All 4,000 plus words of family dysfunction, fraud, and the price of standing your ground. Make of it what you will. I just needed to tell someone the whole truth, and Reddit seemed like the place to do it.